In the Bible, few stories reveal the profound difference of living a life for God versus one for the world, like that of Rachel and Leah from the book of Genesis. Beneath their rivalry lies a powerful lesson about trust, faith, and where we put our devotion in life and the consequences of doing so. Rachel and Leah's choices echo throughout the generations and show us the impact of seeking fulfillment versus chasing the empty promises of idols and worldly desires. In Genesis 29, Jacob is fleeing from the wrath of his brother Esau after stealing his blessing. So he decided to live with his uncle Laban in the land of Haran. The first time he sees Laban, his daughter Rachel is with him, and he ends up liking her right away. There's actually an interesting passage here that's easy to miss. When Jacob had told him his story, Laban explained, "You really are my own flesh and blood." Jacob had told Laban about what he did to Esau, and it turned out that Laban was also a really tricky guy. It wasn't long after that until Laban played his first trick on Jacob, as he knew that Jacob loved Rachel. He leveraged Jacob's love for his daughter by getting him to agree to work for 7 years to marry her. Then, on his wedding night, Laban switched Rachel for Leah, his older daughter, and tricked Jacob into working for another 7 years to marry Rachel. So Jacob agreed to work 7 more years. A week after Jacob had married Leah, Laban gave him Rachel too. Laban gave Rachel a servant, Bilhah, to be her maid. So Jacob slept with Rachel too, and he loved her much more than Leah. He then stayed and worked for Laban the additional 7 years. This is where the intriguing part of the story really begins. God ends up having mercy on Leah because he saw that she was unloved and let her have children while Rachel stayed childless. So Leah became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She named him Reuben, for she said, "The Lord has noticed my misery, and now my husband will love me." You can really feel that the desire of Leah's heart was to earn the love of her husband, whom she loved very much, but was in love with her sister and barely acknowledged her. She soon became pregnant again and gave birth to another son she named Simeon. For she said, "The Lord has heard that I was unloved, and he has given me another son." Then she became pregnant a 3rd time and gave birth to another son. He was named Levi, for she said, "Surely this time my husband will feel affection for me, since I have given him 3 sons." At this point, Leah had now been feeling unloved for years, and she had conceived 3 consecutive sons for Jacob, but he still didn't seem to love her even after all that. She was fully dedicated to doing everything for him, and yet his heart remained cold towards her. What would you do? It was from the depths of this despair that Leah learned a powerful lesson. Once again, Leah became pregnant and gave birth to another son. She named him Judah, for she said, "Now I will praise the Lord." And then she stopped having children. It was in this moment where Leah turned her affection from trying to seek the love from the husband who just wouldn't love her, to loving the God who had loved her since the beginning. Each time she had a son, she was hoping it would move Jacob's heart and that they would get closer together, but each time those expectations were a letdown. It was from this painful place of rejection that she learned to trust in God, who loved her and blessed her life repeatedly. She no longer needed the approval of her husband. She only needed the love of God to make her life fulfilling and wonderful. That's such a powerful lesson. It's also worth mentioning that the word Judah means praise, and it was from the lineage of Judah that Jesus the Messiah was born. When we turn our hearts to God and praise Him in the difficult situations, it births wonderful things in our lives and in future generations as well. But that's not where the story ends. When Rachel saw that she wasn't having any children for Jacob, she became jealous of her sister. She pleaded with Jacob, "Give me children or I'll die." Then Jacob became furious with Rachel. "Am I God?" he asked. "He's the one who has kept you from having children." Rachel was never interested in seeking God. She wasn't even interested in the love of her husband at this point. All she cared about was competing with her sister, which created a rift in her marriage. She ended up giving her maid Bilhah to Jacob to have children in her place. Bilhah then gave birth to a child who Rachel stepped in and named Dan, which means God has vindicated me. But did he? Bilhah then had a second son, which Rachel named Naphtali, for she said, I have struggled hard with my sister, and I'm winning. It's a bit delusional because it wasn't even Rachel who was the one that had the children. At this point, Leah couldn't help but be pulled into the rivalry with her sister a little bit and ended up giving her servant Zilpah to Jacob, who had a son named Gad. As Leah said, how fortunate I am. Then Zilpah had Asher, and Leah said, what joy is mine. Now the other women will celebrate me. Even though they were both competing, there's a clear difference in the naming of the children between them. Rachel named her children directly to go against Leah, but Leah's names were focused more on her own blessing. The story then takes an interesting turn as Reuben, Leah's first son, found some mandrakes while he was farming one day. Rachel wanted the mandrakes so bad that she let Jacob sleep with Leah for one night in exchange for the mandrakes. This seems pretty confusing in modern day culture because mandrakes just seem kind of like an irrelevant plant, but if you look back in their days and a little bit throughout history, you can see that mandrakes were used in witchcraft for infertility. Despite all of her struggling and her difficulties, Rachel didn't seem to go to God even once to ask for her own children. She just tried her own ways and even resorted to pagan witchcraft to try to get children. So that night, he slept with Leah, and God answered Leah's prayers. She became pregnant again and gave birth to a fifth son for Jacob. She named him Issachar, for she said, God has rewarded me for giving my servant to my husband as a wife. Then Leah became pregnant again and gave birth to a sixth son for Jacob. She named him Zebulun, for she said, God has given me a good reward. Now my husband will treat me with respect, for I have given him 6 sons. Leah had been praying to God to give her more sons, and he answered her prayers. She seemed to have a very healthy relationship with God and even with her husband at this point. It's clear that she no longer needed his affection or his love, but rather she only needed his respect, which is the foundation of any healthy relationship. This is a clear sign of her deep dedication to God and the reward she got for it. God then did grant Rachel some mercy though, and she did give birth to a son. And she named him Joseph, for she said, may the Lord add yet another son to my family. Now, this was a good breakthrough for Rachel, and it might have been the only breakthrough in her life because she did recognize that it was God who gave her the blessing. But even in that, she couldn't help but even make the name to ask for another son. She was still so focused on competing with her sister. It was at this time that Jacob wanted to leave Laban and take his family back to his home country, since he had become so wealthy through his wisdom that God had granted him. They ended up leaving without telling his uncle Laban, so Laban eventually ended up chasing them down, and when he caught up with them, he had this interesting statement. I can understand that you're feeling that you must go and your intense longing for your father's home, but why have you stolen my gods? Jacob was so oblivious that it was actually Rachel who had stolen Laban's household idols and who was hiding them and who was confiding in them. She had kept this secret even from her own husband. Then Jacob had invited Laban to search around the camp, and he even gave him permission to kill whoever had the idols if they had stolen them. Finally, he went into Rachel's tent, but Rachel had taken the household idols and hidden them in her camel saddle, and now she was sitting on them. When Laban had thoroughly searched her tent without finding them, she said to her father, please, sir, forgive me if I don't get up for you. I'm having my monthly period. So Laban continued his search, but he could not find the household idols. Clearly, Rachel had learned these devious tactics from her father. She had stolen the idols, and she was putting her trust in them instead of seeking God genuinely. It was after this that Jacob soon had a life-changing encounter where he wrestled with God's angel all night and received a blessing of a new name, Israel. This was the next step in the promise that God had given to Abraham, and it was from Jacob that God's chosen people would arise into a nation. Israel then made peace with Esau, who was his brother whom he had deceived. This encounter seemed to not only transform his name, but also helped him get closer to God and develop his character. Through Rachel's desire, she did end up getting pregnant one more time, as she had asked God when she gave birth to Joseph. After the delivery, Rachel was about to die, and she tried to name her second son Ben-Oni, which means son of my sorrow. But Jacob decided to change his name to Benjamin, which means son of my right hand. So Rachel died and was buried on the way to Ephrath, that is Bethlehem. Jacob set up a stone monument over Rachel's grave, and it can be seen there to this day. In the end, Rachel was buried by the side of the road because she didn't put her faith in the Most High God. She was bitter to the very end of her life, as she had just trusted in idols and been so focused on beating her sister, and jealousy consumed her to the end of her life. Her bitterness and hatred ended up consuming her, and that's also a powerful lesson. Instead of being honored by being buried in a respectable place, Jacob just buried her on the side of the road, reflecting the dishonor that she had in life. Also, despite being the younger sister, she ended up meeting her end far earlier than Leah. In fact, she even passed away before Isaac, Jacob's father. So what about Leah? What became of her, and how did she live her life after that? The Bible doesn't detail the exact time when Leah died, but it does reveal how she was honored in her death, which was a stark contrast of what happened to Rachel. Jacob decided to bury her in the cave of Machpelah with all the notable ancestors of Israel. When Jacob was about to die, he made this powerful statement about where Leah was buried. There, Abraham and his wife Sarah were buried. There, Isaac and his wife Rebekah were buried. And there, I buried Leah. While Rachel's life of bitterness and self-seeking led her to be buried on the side of the road, Leah's life of learning to trust in God and honor her husband led to him recognizing her as his true wife in the end. This emphasizes the importance of a famous proverb: guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. The meaning of this popular verse is actually not about keeping people from hurting you, as many people have believed. Rather, it's about reflecting and protecting the affections of your desires of your heart. We should not focus on the wrong things or pursuing evil or trying to do things our way instead of God's. Instead, we should always seek to do the right things and in the right way, and trust in God to bless the works of our hands and the paths of our lives. Whether we're in a loveless marriage or another difficult situation, we can never afford to compromise our morals or our faith. Instead, we must press into God and trust Him to bring about the best results. I want to leave you with just one powerful reminder. And we know that God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to His purpose for them.